In this video, we're going to be replacing the map sensor on this 2005 Honda Element. Our negative terminal here, 10mm nut. Go ahead and back that off now. And set that aside. So our intake tube here goes from our airbox down to our throttle body. And everything in the middle here is connected. So we're going to start disconnecting things from our intake tube. We're just going to pull them right out. All right, so just keep working these out. This here runs all the way down and around, so we're going to remove this hose just by pulling it straight off and set that aside. This harness here, if you follow it around, will be connected to a electrical connector in the back. We'll just remove that now. Set that aside. If you follow this down, this is actually in one of these little rubber wire holds here. Just remove that. Working up here, we have this connection. We can remove this hose clamp. We'll just use a pair of pliers here and try and spin it a little. Just peel it right off. These cables here, if you follow them up, are in these little clamps. We'll just pull these up and out. And just move these aside. They are going to kind of rest where they want to rest, but they are disconnected, which is nice. So now what we're going to do is remove our hose clamps on the bottom of our intake tube where it meets our throttle body. So down here we have our hose clamp, and we're going to remove this. This one's going to be an 8mm. So we'll back out and loosen up that hose clamp. You can also see right next to it, we have our throttle position sensor harness. If we remove our throttle body, our throttle position sensor will be attached to it. So we're going to unplug that now while we're here. I'm going to set that plug aside. Now we're going to move up our intake tube to our airbox, remove the front cover of our airbox, and that'll allow us to take the front cover and our intake tube out of the vehicle. We have what should be an 8mm or a Phillips. I like to use the 8mm so we don't strip it out. Also, if you go look at the top one, it looks like there is no Phillips in there, and it may just be a rounded out 8mm. So we're going to do our best to remove these guys here. We are also missing one on the other side. Yep. And there's one down the bottom. We're still held in by the top one, so we'll need a pair of locking pliers to back that one out. With what should be 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts removed, you should now be able to lift your intake tube and front of your airbox up and off. While doing that, we're going to twist a little bit and remove it from our throttle body. You can now take this out of the vehicle. So now our goal here is to remove our throttle body. So we're still going to need to remove some things around it before we get there. We're going to start with these lines here. There's 2. All right, so there should be hose clamps on here. It looks like they've rotted off. The one on the bottom isn't even tight, but it is there, and I think part of it's rotted away. Yep. So I need to replace those while we get into the reinstallation. Now we're going to take our needle nose and see if we can spin these hoses to break them loose. If your system's full of coolant or your system's hot, you're going to want to take caution. We have a drip pad down now underneath here, a little absorbent pad. You should expect to see some coolant come out of here. Just be prepared for that. Okay, grip and rip, let it flow. All right, so we have another hose on top here. We'll just squeeze that clamp. Move out of the way and see if we can get our hose to come off. There we go. So what we're going to do here to get these loose and free of this bracket is actually take the bracket off. Somebody's been here before us and they've taken this harness out of this clip and they didn't put this bracket bolt back in. So in this case it's going to be a little bit easier to remove this bracket. So we're going to go ahead and do that. It'll be a 10 millimeter. So now we have 2 bolts removed and our bracket is now free. So what this will allow us to do is get to the underside. If we follow our throttle body to the bottom side, you'll see we have one more plug and a harness connected to this bracket here. To remove our throttle body from the vehicle, we have 2 12 millimeter nuts and 2 12 millimeter bolts. We'll go ahead and remove those now. Now at this point, you can remove your studs or nuts, bolts or nuts. We can now remove our throttle body. Now if you remember, we still have things attached to it, so we're going to have to address those. The first thing we're going to do is get it into a working area here where we can unplug our electrical connection on the bottom here. All right, so we're just going to use a pick tool and get in here underneath this clip. Let's see if we can't remove this plug. There we go. Now with that removed, we have a little bit more freedom here. So our Phillips head screw holding our map sensor in place has rotted away. It's stripped out and there is no way we're going to be able to use a Phillips head on there. It's very difficult to get a set of locking pliers on there. So what we're going to use is a extractor socket that we're going to have to hammer down onto it. 1/4 inch drive. Alright, so our map sensor here, I'm going to disconnect our electrical to our map sensor. I'm just going to get under here with the pick tool. Pop up that tab and just pull our plug off. So now our map sensor, the stud's broken off in here, which might give us a little bit of trouble, but I'm going to see if we can pry our map sensor up and out. So now that you have your old map sensor out, take our new map sensor, we put just a little bit of oil around the O-ring here, and we're just going to push it down into position. Again, that new O-ring might cause you a little difficulty seating it all the way down. Just try and be even with your pressure. And it won't go any further. We're going to go ahead and put our bolt in. So in our case, we replaced this with an 8 millimeter bolt. And we'll just snug that up nice and tight. Once that's all done, we can then plug in our electrical connection. We're going to take the rag out of the intake. We're going to take our throttle body. We're going to try and keep our cables lined up the best we can. And we're going to lower our throttle body down onto the 2 studs that we have. Alright, so once we're down on our 2 studs, we're going to put our 2 nuts on our studs just to hold our throttle body in place. Alright, now we still have 2 more bolts. All right, and we'll go ahead, take our 12 mil, and we'll snug all those up. We're going to do this just to snug them up. We're going to go in a crisscross pattern. So we're bringing in the throttle body nice and flat. All right, now that we've got them snugged up, we can work on reconnecting a couple of hoses and a bracket here for our throttle cable. So now we're going to take our throttle cable bracket here and mount that bracket back up. Now if you remember, our car was actually missing this bolt. So at the very end, if we can come up with a bolt to replace that with, we will. So the next thing we're going to plug in is our electrical connection down the bottom here, which is going to be this plug. And the tab, the release tab on the plug is going to go on the bottom, like that. From here, we're going to take this harness, I'm going to clip it back into the throttle body bracket. Alright, so we have our upper coolant line here and our lower coolant line. We also have another upper coolant line here. We're just going to reattach those. Our hose clamps disintegrated as we took them off, so we replaced them. The sizes of the sockets we use will be slightly different than yours. So for these, they're going to be 1/4 inch. And we're just going to tighten these down. Now this hose clamp here, this style in particular, you want to be careful not to put it too far like this. You won't be able to get your air intake tube on. So you're going to have to figure out a good position for that, which for us is going to be flip this around. And put it on the outside. Now that we have our 3 lines tightened up, we can move on. We're going to plug in our throttle position sensor. Alright, and this is going to go up to our intake tube. So now we have our intake tube and the front part of our air intake box. Again, we have stripped out 8mm here and one missing here and one that's completely frozen down here. So when we replace this, it's just going to be these 2. You would obviously do all 4. On the bottom of our intake tube, we have a little notch here that we're going to have to align on our throttle body. So what we're going to do is just lower this down to our throttle body, kind of get it into position. And now we're just going to push it down onto our throttle body and align that notch, or that tab. Alright, so now that we're lined up down the bottom here, we're just going to tighten up that hose clamp. Working our way up, we have this harness. It's going to go into this bottom clip here. It's going to go into this clip right here. Right about where that white tape is marked. And it's going to go under and plug in. So we have our 2 cables going to our throttle body. They're just going to pop right in here. Just going to line the bottom one up, push that into place. Line the top one up, push that into place. We then have this hose here and get our hose clamp ready. We're just going to push this right onto the intake and then put our hose clamp on. From here, moving up on this side, we have this hose that we put aside here. There's a hard plastic piece on this hose. It's going to go right here. It's going to push in, and then our hose up top is going to push right on. So our air intake, or our air box here, we're going to make sure that we are inside of our air filter, and it will push close and seat nicely. At that point, we can start putting in our bolts here. They're going to be Phillips or 8mm. We're going to go with the 8mm. And on the top, because it is stripped out, we're going to use a pair of locking pliers. Now that that's snugged up, on top here, these are just going to get clipped right in. Just press them in. So once you have your cable here, right up in top, it's the last place for that cable to sit. Then you can plug these guys in. Everything's back to normal. We're up here at our radiator cap. What we're going to do is remove our radiator cap, and we're going to fill our radiator. All right, so we can put our cap aside, drop our funnel in. So you're going to want to fill this up to the top. Then you're going to want to run your vehicle. You don't want to cap it first. You're going to want to run your vehicle to operating temperature and let it cool down and recheck your radiator coolant level. At that point, if you need any more coolant, go ahead and add it to the top. You may want to repeat the process once or twice just to make sure you're totally full, and you're good. And the same thing on this side, just push it straight down. And tighten our negative terminal down as well. Try and give that a twist. Make sure nothing moves.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.